The Box, our panel discussion on social media. I'm Gillian St. Kevin, the host, and with me today are Laurie Blanton,
Hi.
J. Scott Coatsworth,
Hey.
Sarah Waits,
Hi.
and Nusordia Andrews.
Hello.
So, this is going to be a really cool discussion because basically social media is the bane of my existence, like it is for many other authors. And I really wanted to have this discussion because all four of you approach social media in very different ways. And I'm just really excited to hear what you have to say about it. So let's go around and introduce ourselves, give a bit of background about how we approach social media, whether we're coming at it from an author perspective, a marketing perspective, all of that. So let's start with Laurie. Tell us about yourself, Laurie.
I'm the owner of Indigo Marketing and Design, and I do social media marketing and work for independently published authors. And I am also the marketing manager for a couple of small publishing companies. So I kind of do my job from different perspectives. One is from the publisher's perspective, marketing for them, for their authors, and then marketing for individual authors. So my approach is a little different depending on who my client is. Um, I do, you know, the same things that a lot of marketing professionals do who are publishing and marketing books, and that's blog tours and blitzes and posting to Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. So like I said, it really depends on who my client is, but that's what I do.
So, Laurie, are you also an author or just purely a marketing consultant?
No, I'm not an author, and I kind of fell into marketing in a very backwards way. In 2009 I took over the Goodreads Romance group. There were
Oh,
9 members
wow.
at the time, and I think there's
Wow.
over 22,000 now. It
Uh-huh.
was languishing, and I said, oh, there has to be other people who like Romance. So I took that over and grew it and caught the attention of a publisher who's now out of business, like so many, unfortunately. And he said, would you like to do marketing for us? And I said, I don't know anything about marketing. And he said, well, you obviously do because you grew the Goodreads group. So I'm like, well, that's just fun. That's not a job. So anyway, I kind of learned from him and working for him, and then started my own business, and now do both, working for publishers and for independent authors. So
That's
totally
really cool.
self-taught, still learning.
I think we're all still learning. Scott, I know you are an author, so yeah. Did you become an author and then learn marketing to help yourself, or was it the other way around?
Um, a little bit of both. I was never a big marketer. My dad's the guy that can sell anybody and anything, and I didn't really acquire that skill. But I started out writing in 2014 seriously. Got my first story published, and have since published about almost 40 stories now between novels, short stories, and novellas. Um, I like to joke that Laurie is my arch rival because we also do Other Worlds Inc. or is book tours, but we are very copacetic. We run a lot of Laurie's tours on our sites that we do, and Laurie's a great marketer as well. So I've actually learned some things from you, Laurie. Um,
Oh, thank you, Scott. Thanks.
you're welcome. We also run Queer Sci-Fi, Queer Romance Inc., and Liminal Fiction. So those are sites for authors and readers to kind of help bring both together, and two of those are directories. So I do social media marketing for myself as an author. That's how I started with the blog tours. I also do social media for our various websites and help other authors get materials out there. So I've kind of approached it from both of those angles. And again, I'm always learning. My specialty is probably Facebook, with Twitter my secondary. Instagram, I'm on Instagram technically, but I haven't really posted much there in about a year because when I first started, it was right before COVID hit. And I was using it to post like cool pictures of art and things I ran across in the real world. And I haven't been out in the real world for a year and 2 months. So Yeah, that's my Facebook and Twitter are kind of my jam.
COVID's really disrupted a lot of people's social media plans, I feel.
Yes, a lot of things, not just social media. Yeah.
Mm. Hey, Sarah, you're a designer, right? So,
Yes, I'm not an author. I'm a book cover artist. So most of my social media marketing is promoting my artwork. So a bit different there. But I've also done some marketing internships with traditional publishers. So I have that background. And let's see, I was a business major. So technically, I even took a class on marketing, but it was terrible and I didn't learn anything. And I had a book blog for many years, which is probably more on the publicity side of things. But it seems like nobody can ever agree what exactly is the distinction between marketing and publicity. So who knows?
Fair.
that sounds like a really interesting background. I'm going to really enjoy hearing from you later. And finally, Nusordia, tell us about your journey.
Okay, so I started as an author, and I did an internship because I was trying to get to know people and network, and that led to me working for Inkslinger PR. And I've done that for, I think, 8 years now. I forget. About June of 2019, I purchased the company with one of the other publicists there. And that's just been what we've been doing ever since. We run blog tours and social media management for our indie clients. We work with some traditional publishers. So I take I take a different approach to marketing and social media based on what I'm doing. If I'm talking about my own stuff or if I'm working for Inkslinger and our clients. So it varies what I'm doing when I'm doing it and what kind of, which platform I'm using. But Inkslinger likes to focus on Instagram and Facebook, and we've been looking into TikTok recently because it's growing more and more popular with book bloggers and book readers. So that's where our focus is.
That sounds really cool. Your bio describes yourself as a self-confessed book addict. Do you find being a fan helps you market other people's work?
I think so. I think it's really important to be passionate about the books that you're talking about so that that translates to other people. That excitement becomes contagious. So, caring about a book and not just being like, okay, this person's going to pay me money because that's great and everything. That's how I pay my bills. But, being passionate about the book and the stories that I'm working with is really important. And it's one of the reasons Inkslinger is super selective about who we work with.
That's really important advice, I think, not just for anyone working in marketing, but for us sort of authors out there. Social media can be so draining that it's really important that you're passionate and care about what you do to kind of withstand all of that, the constant sort of more of social media.
Yeah.
So let's start with our first question. What should an author do before they even think about approaching social media? Sarah, you can approach this as what should a book cover designer or an artist, what should they do before sort of getting into social media? So who wants to start us off? Sarah, okay.
Well, for authors, I would say have a website or have some place with buy links that you can link to in your social media posts. I know probably a big pet peeve of anyone who's worked with book marketing is authors posting about their book and then not linking to it. Like we want people to be able to find the book. Please show them where to find the book.
I feel called out. I've actually posted on Facebook saying, here's my new release, check it out. And then the first comment is like, Jillian, where's the link? So, Scott, you laughed. I think it looks like you've got some feelings about this.
Well, one of the pieces of advice that I was given at an early conference I went to was you can't do it all. There are too many social media sites, and like you said, they take too much out of you. So you have to kind of check the sites out and figure out which one seems to fit your vibe as an author, and also that it's something that you feel comfortable using. For me, it was Facebook, just because I got started with it so early on in my actually before my writing career. But try out each of the social media sites and start with one. Work your presence on that, make connections, and then if you feel comfortable with that, then move on to another and add that. But at some point, you do reach a saturation point, and I I hear TikTok and I think, on the one hand, really exciting and cool. On the other hand, I'm like, I can't do one more social media platform. Um, so yeah, you kind of reach at that point where you've got to figure out, what's working for you, and not over stress yourself by trying to take it all at one and be on every single platform at once.
Cool.
Yeah.
So
I
Miss
think it's
Audia?
important for,
Go ahead.
I think authors need to think about their brand, and
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
they need to have that established before they even finish their first book. They need to know who they are, what they're going to put out to the world as far as their social media presence. I see authors do it a couple of different ways. Some are very authentic. They're themselves. Their Facebook and social media accounts are full of personal, anecdotes. Their kids, their animals, where they live. All about their lives, and that's great for some. And others want to have more of a separate persona, and that's their brand. It could be very different from their real life, and that's fine. But knowing, who you are and what you want to show the world is important. And then when you get on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, you need to keep your brand consistent across all of your platforms, your website, your marketing, your social media presence. And I'm surprised at the number of authors who don't have a social media presence at all.
Mm.
I think that in this day and age, you have to be using it as a networking tool, and you have to treat it as almost a full-time job. The most successful authors, I think, in the genre are those that are well loved by their fans and are on Facebook and social media all the time. That's the way they grow their fan base, by making themselves accessible.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Miss Audia?
I think that agreeing with Scott, doing something well is better than doing everything. Kind
Yeah.
of me. So pick what you want to do, what you're good at, and do it really well. Make that your niche. And agreeing with Lori, knowing your brand. I have dealt with authors before who want to wrap their entire brand up into their first release, and having a brand that's consistent and will carry across all of your career instead of just one book is really important. So I understand that urge, but make sure the brand is consistent and will last past this one release or this one series.
Yeah,
That's
it's awfully hard to
really
change that brand like downstream. I
Yeah.
changed what I was writing from one genre to another, and making a jump from what people conceive you as to a different thing to be conceived as it takes a lot of time and work.
Yes, it does.
I've got the
Right. If your
opposite
first
problem.
book is a BDSM and you're known for your leather bustiers and all the trappings of BDSM, and then 10 years down the road or 5 years down the road you start to write sweet romance YA, you've kind of pigeonholed yourself. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
absolutely good advice, to think about the long term and not just your first book when you're branding
And
yourself.
I think that's where pen names also come in. So if
Yeah.
you're writing that BDSM book under one pen name, you might want to go with a different pen name for the sweet YA.
Yeah, or your children's books. Yeah.
Yeah.
One more thing I was just thinking of when Laurie was talking, and it's sort of related to brand. Decide whether you want to have your politics in as part of your brand. For
Yeah.
me, it was an easy decision because all the people that like me, being in the LGBTQ community, not everybody, but a lot of people have very similar politics to what I have. But a lot of people out there don't. And if you put out your political views as an author or under the stuff where people are going to read it as an author, that may affect your book sales or who wants to read you. So make a conscious decision. Again, the pen name can come in handy there to separate that off, but make a decision about how open you're going to be about those views.
I think that's very important advice, especially for US authors, where the your politics seems to be extremely divisive. I'd like to come back to the branding discussion because I have the opposite problem to Scott in that it's not quite as severe as writing BDSM and then moving to sweet romance. But my first published book was seasonal erotica, followed by sexy paranormal romance, followed by extremely slow building mythological fantasy / urban fantasy without the urban, followed now by gothic historical romances. So I feel like I've shot myself in the foot branding wise because my readers don't know what they're going to get from me. And I think that means they're always a bit uncertain. And some people love everything I write, but that's a very small minority.
Mhm.
So is there any saving my author brand here? What would you tell authors who, like me, have come at writing without a plan and just flailed all over the place and now don't know who they are?
I would say look and see if there's any similar. They might be very different genres, but are there any similarities in the types of stories or characters or the feel of them?
Mhm.
Is there something you come back to writing again and again? And if you can, maybe it helps to think of 3 words that describe the books you write, and then you can build your brand around that.
Awesome.
Addressing this when and I'm gonna be I haven't published in a couple of years, but before I took a long hiatus because of personal reasons, I had released close to 40 books. And they ranged from contemporary to erotica to fantasy to sci-fi to there was a zombie series in there too. So there was a lot. There was a lot.
Yeah.
And when I sat down with my publicist at the very beginning of my career, I told her I write across a lot of genres. And we marketed it that way, knowing that everything was going like from one series to another, from one book to another, the stories and the genres were going to change. But what you could always count on from me was a character driven story with high stakes. And I think once you've figured out what's, very specific to your stories, what you do consistently across the board, whatever genre you're in, that's easier to market.
That's absolutely brilliant advice. So my next question is, how do you figure out an author brand? Sarah's given us some really good advice there with like, look at what's in what your work has in common and boil that down to 3 words. Are there any other approaches that you'd recommend?
I wish I had it as down as Lori says we should. I kind of started scattershot just like you did, Jillian. I was writing romance, and then I went off and I did a zombie story like Nazaria. I had just all kinds of different things that I wrote, and I've kind of narrowed it down now to speculative fiction that's hopeful. But
I
a
love
lot of that
that.
was just kind of trial and error. And I think where I've come at it too is I'm now narrowing in on what I want my brand to be, and I'm slowly letting the other stuff either go out of print or kind of de-emphasizing it in my marketing, and focusing on that kind of hope punk, kind of hopeful spec fic brand. So yeah, it's just kind of slowly working it to where you want it to be, and once you figured out what that is, because I wish I had known at the very beginning what I wanted. I wish I had the opportunity to get into the market where I wanted to, but romance was kind of the end that I had to get into publishing. So
I
We've
think it's
had
okay for your brand to be fluid, and it's even okay to rebrand yourself at some point in your career. Um, I think that having, like what Sarah said, 3 or 4 words, kind of a tagline that
yeah.
encompasses what you write. It doesn't have to be genre specific. It doesn't have to be pairing specific. It can just be something like, um, stories written from the heart, or I mean, that's kind of cliche, but you know what I mean? It can just be something that speaks to what
Mhm.
you're passionate about as an author. Because even if you're writing something from sweet romance to erotica, there's still a common thread that runs through your books because you're the author. And you know, they can be totally different stories, but it's still your voice.
Mhm.
So, you know, I think it's important to really think, like I said before, about not just your brand and what you write, but how you want to put that message out to the world through social media, and how hands-on do you want to be with your fans. You know, how much of your life is an open book, and how much do you want to just really focus on the books and your writing, and not so much your personal life. That's where I think social media gets confusing for a lot of authors, and some of them start out being really an open book and then decide that's not comfortable for them and they back off. So, you know, putting some thought into that in the beginning, I think is important.
I think that's very good advice. We've got a question in the chat here from Marvin saying, do you suggest having a more open generic brand or being specific?
Hey, Marvin.
Hi, Marvin. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself. So, you know, you want to have a brand that, like I said, is fluid and that can change over time. Um, you know, I work for an author who writes Hawaiian romances, and so her whole brand is Hawaii. She posts beautiful pictures of Hawaii and flowers, and she's very into the horse culture and horsewomen in Hawaii, and that's her whole thing. Um, you know, she will probably never write BDSM because that's not her as an author. So, you know, what she's doing and how she's branding herself is very specific to what she writes. Um, and, you know, that doesn't say that she couldn't rebrand herself or morph into something else, but she would never go to an extreme. And I think most authors kind of have an idea of what they want to write, and I think the use of a pen name is another great idea. If you're going to go totally off brand, then just, you know, create a pen name. Then you have two social media marketing things to worry about.
I know.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
On the subject of social media being a lot of work, we've got another question from Marvin. If you had to pick one social media channel to focus on, what do you think it should be?
I
I
think
think
a
that
lot of
depends.
it depends on what you're writing. I know that some genres do better on different platforms. Fantasy and contemporary romance seems to be doing really well on TikTok and Instagram. So I think that looking at what the people who are writing in your genre are doing and doing well, and how their social media is performing, is something that should be taken into consideration, but it does depend a lot on what you're writing.
I
I
would
think it also.
say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say quickly, I think it also depends on your demographic, what age group you're trying to reach out to. In romance, I think it's mostly, it's a lot of older, you know, 30s, 40s, 50s-year-old women that are reading romance for the most part. And I think that demographic is on Facebook. You know, the younger generation, I sound so old. I'm going to be 60 in July, so I guess I'm old.
That's
They're
not
on
old.
TikTok and and Instagram and all those other platforms. So I think you have to think about who your target audience is.
I well, I am 25 and feel too old for TikTok. It's there, but I would say it's social media, but email and your news list is very valuable because you own it. Like social
Mhm.
media platforms rise and fall. I am still on Tumblr, but I don't know how many of the accounts that actually follow me there are alive because so many people have left the platform. And like I know Facebook algorithms have been changing a lot, and that's something I've been seeing as an artist and trying to deal with. And I know communities are moving elsewhere, so I think everything's in flux. So when you So not just putting all your eggs in one basket, using different social media platforms, and if you can, funneling them towards a newsletter or something else that you have control over.
So that leads brilliantly into another question. How do you stay on top of changing algorithms and updates and new forms of social media?
I have no idea.
Silence. I am relieved actually, because I feel like I just get the hang of one platform, and then
Yeah.
Facebook
Yeah.
changes its algorithm and I no longer know how to do what I've been doing very happily until then. Oh, that's such a relief.
My husband Mark and I run some a website company as well called Mongoose in the Loose, and we've been fighting this whole Google algorithm thing for like 20 some years. You know, we used to get tons of traffic on certain things, and now who knows? And there's tons of SEO experts who claim they will help you, and you get one and hire them, and they give you one set of advice, and then you hire another one 6 months later, and they give you a different set of advice and tell you everything the first guy told you was wrong, and you need to redo everything. And at some point, you just I feel like you just have to focus on your content and do what you do, because you're never going to keep up with everything. But sorry, Nazaria, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I agree. Content is going to be the key, because the algorithms change all the time on all platforms. And so trying to keep up with them, you're not going to. So keeping up good content is going to be the most effective thing you can do.
Yeah. And we haven't talked about reviews yet. The bane of every author's existence, but you know, word of mouth is still king, you know, no matter what you're selling. And you know, reviews are everything. And so, you know, if you can focus on getting together, you know, a group of fans that love your work, put together a street team. You know, Facebook groups are good for that. Really cultivating your fan base and having them help you get the word out, having them help you, you know, by writing reviews. You know, that's going to get you to the top of the list in Amazon. You know, it doesn't. You can buy Facebook ads till you're blue in the face, and they're not gonna get you where you need to go. It's all about your fan base and the reviews.
I have to
And
take
word of
exception with
mouth.
that, though. I have to take exception with that, though, Lori. It's the synopsis is the bane of my existence.
Yeah.
But no, reviews are no fun, and yeah, I've gotten a lot of good reviews, but it's I think reviews on platforms, you have to distinguish between reviews on like Amazon and Goodreads versus reviews on blogs, because I think they're two different beasts. And I think reviews on blogs can be much more helpful generally for marketing, because you usually get a more in-depth review, but they also have a lot smaller slice of the market. Whereas reviews on Amazon and Goodreads can help drive some of the ranking on those platforms, especially in Amazon. But yeah, reviews are hard. They're hard to get
Yeah.
people to do them, and hard to not, like with Amazon, you have the whole thing of if Amazon thinks that somebody didn't buy your book and is just doing a review because you gave them a free copy, they can take your review down, and you know you're at the mercy of the platforms with them.
Absolutely.
I think with book blogs and reviews, one of the reasons they're helpful is that book bloggers all read each other's book blogs. So if one of them gives a good review to your book, then people who regularly review might be more likely to pick it up.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to experiment with things. I'm currently experimenting with Story Origin and Book Sprout. Just trying different things to see what gets traction. I mean, the great thing about Story Origin is you can join newsletter swaps and group promos, and I'm doing that with a fairly large publisher that I work with. So we have a large newsletter list, and so you know, even if we're swapping, excuse me, with a smaller newsletter list, we're still reaching 2,000 or 3,000 people that we might not normally reach. So
Do you find it effective?
I'm sorry.
I've just started using Story Origin and I like it, but have you found it effective?
I don't know yet. We haven't been doing it long enough, and I'm still trying to figure out how to track that.
Yeah. It kind of blends in with everything else.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I do a lot of things that I'm not sure whether they're effective or not, but
You do
you
what
know,
you can, like you throw the
aesthetics
stuff on the
side.
wall and see what sticks, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a question for the authors on this panel. I find it really hard to ask for reviews. I feel super sleazy, like I'm fishing for compliments.
Uh,
Do you have that feeling as well? And if so, how do you overcome it?
I made my publicist ask for people to review my book.
Yeah, that's
So
Touche.
funny.
yes, I did. I had that same problem, and I hated asking for reviews, and that's why I hired somebody to do it for me.
That's genius. Scott?
I think I never really have had that much of a problem. Maybe I'm just too much of a no, not a narcissist, too much of an optimist about my work. I don't know, but I always try to make it clear when I do ask for reviews that I want an honest review. You know, I'm not giving this book to you to say I want you to write only wonderful things about it, and I think that's important in terms of giving the folks that are reviewing it the freedom to really kind of get deep in the book and give you good feedback. And sometimes you may not like that feedback, but it may help you for the next book. But yeah, I think it's important if you believed in this book enough to spend, 3 months, 6 months, a year of your blood, sweat, and tears writing it, then believe in it enough to put it out there for people to review it for you.
I think that's so important. One of the earliest book reviews I got was really negative. At the
Yeah,
end, it felt like the worst, at the time, it felt like the worst thing that could ever happen to me. But I learned so much from that review that now I'm really grateful to it. So, question: what is sort of the biggest mistake that you've made while doing sort of promotion for yourself or for other authors, and what did you learn from it?
we're all perfect.
I think for myself, I try really hard not to oversell. I'd rather, I'd rather undersell and over deliver.
Mhm.
But it's hard because you're dealing with a product that has a lot of emotion tied to it. You know, when you're marketing somebody's baby, it's hard. It's hard. I try and be very honest with them. And it's like with the reviews, when they come to me and they say, oh, so and so gave me a 3-star review. It's like, that's great. Well, but I wanted a 5-star review. It's like, well, you got an honest review and it's 3 stars, and that's great. So I think the lesson that I learned early on was to undersell and over deliver, and not promise things that weren't realistic. I had just a quick story. I had an author ask me if I had any contacts at Netflix because she thought her series would be great on Netflix. And, I had to just gently say, well, no, I don't have any contacts at Netflix. And, I don't think that they're, just buying stories from people like that. But I don't know. I think my lesson learned is just to try and be gentle but be honest.
I think that's fantastic advice in any setting.
Maybe personal accounts versus business accounts on some social media. I set up some business accounts for my design stuff and then realized that the algorithms suppress business accounts because they want you to pay for promotion.
Yeah,
So really, I should not have started that way.
yeah.
Uh,
Facebook group versus
yeah.
Facebook page, definitely.
Yeah.
One of the things I've seen authors do, and I've had done to us as a reviewer, is to argue with the reviewer. And
Oh no.
I think it's people say, is it okay for me to be in touch with the reviewer? And I think it's absolutely fine if you get a great review to just send a short notice and say, thanks so much for the great review. That's about as far as I would take it. I would never argue with the reviewer because those people are going to be the ones you want to go to next time for your next book to try to get that one reviewed. And it can just turn bad really quickly. So yeah, it's hard. Sometimes you get reviews you don't agree with. Sometimes you get ones that are just really hard to read. I have a group of friends in a Facebook chat, a group chat that I go to, and just basically scream my lungs out when I have something like that happen, and just cry and complain, and then I get it out of my system, and then I'm like, okay, I'm done. So just please never argue with the reviewer. They're hopefully giving it you a good faith review. If they're not, you're not going to convince them otherwise anyway. So
You'll just get on the authors behaving badly list or the
exactly.
Yes. I think that managing expectations, you can't go into a relationship with a marketing professional or a publicist and expect the same results as the biggest name client that they have,
Oh,
because everybody's journey is different, and you're going to get there a different way. So I think managing those expectations, for both myself as an author and for my clients, is super important.
so if I hire you today, I won't be on Netflix tomorrow, is what you're telling me?
Exactly. That's what I'm telling you.
Fair.
We've got a really interesting question from Dahlia here. To what extent can you cross-promote across pen names? I'm considering pen name sharing a world across genres.
I think that it's totally up to you. I know some authors keep their pen names like religiously separated, like so separated that nobody's ever going to find it out. Even their publicists don't know. And then I have other authors who are very open about, their pen names, and they cross promote across their different platforms without blinking an eye. It really does depend on you and what you're comfortable doing.
If you have a really large fan base and you don't you want them to kind of follow you, then you can always say, so and so writing as so and so, so that it's clear, from the beginning that you're this author writing as that author. So it all depends on, how private you want to keep it. If you're writing erotica and now you're writing children's books, you
Right.
probably don't want the two to mingle.
Right.
But if the change is more subtle, and you want your fans to follow you because they like your writing style and they like, what you published so far, then there's nothing wrong with doing the writing as.
Yeah, and one author friend of mine doesn't even do the separate pen names, but they basically use a color coding system for each of their different genres. And so, like on their cards, when you get a little card of they're promoting their books, it's got like green for fantasy and blue for sci-fi and etc. So it's all under the one author name, but you can still kind of pick and choose which part of their genre set you want to read.
Yeah, I do think it depends also like how close those genres are.
Yeah.
Maybe not erotica and children's books, but like erotica and like steamy romance. I think definitely there could be crossover there.
Yeah, fantasy sci-fi or fantasy paranormal or
Yeah.
even yeah.
One thing that I know makes a lot of romance authors unhappy is when they read an author who has always written romance and then kind of slides in an MF romance into a series or into the mix. Because, some people are very rigid about what they read. So if you're going to read, write male romance and you're going to write male female or female female romance, it might be a good idea to separate those so that you don't surprise anybody. Because I've seen a lot of negative reviews about that. So that's just something to consider too.
Yeah, my husband Mark told me about a series he was reading that was a similar thing where they were doing contemporary MM, and then somewhere about book 3 or 4 it became paranormal MM, and it was just a really weird shift. And for somebody that really likes contemporary and does not like genre fiction, paranormal, that kind of thing, it just kind of lost that reader because it was so different from the tone of the rest of the series.
Right.
Yeah, paranormal is something you really have to let people know it's coming.
Yeah.
So I'm guilty of what Laurie mentioned. I've got my Read by Candlelight series that started off with 4 gay romances, but then the 5th book had a lesbian couple at the centre. And I tried to make the series standalone because I knew that not everyone would be here for my ladies. But I know that a lot of readers skipped it and went straight to book 6. Some people tried it and were surprised that it wasn't completely terrible. But hopefully I didn't lose any readers. But I think the key thing there is that I tried to be very, very clear about the fact that this book was not like the others.
Yeah, there's this
Yeah, and
constant
that's
tension
fine
between
too.
this constant tension between wanting to write like all of us wanted to write all these different wonderful things, and I want to go try a children's book and an erotic and a BDSM and a sci-fi, and then trying to also keep your expectations for your readers managed and providing what they know they like from you. So there's that tension that you have to kind of navigate somehow and write enough, do them in some branding way like we talked about earlier, that it's going to make sense to your readers, and kind of maybe rein in some of your impulses of things that you'd like to put out there commercially if it doesn't fit with whatever that brand is.
When with relationship types, I think it's also how you're marketing the books. If you're marketing a series as male romances, then yeah, you would expect everything to be between two men. But if
Yeah.
you're marketing it as like queer romance, then that's a lot broader. It can include bisexual couples of whatever gender, just a lot more variety. And I think there's a lot of sort of nuances in what people expect based on genre labels, like what they expect with something called LGBT versus what gets called lesfic versus male versus gay romance even sometimes is seen as differently. So just there's a lot of things happening there.
Yes, it's your branding again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, if
So
book 1 through 4 hadn't all been if you'd set a precedent in book 2 that you were jumping to a bi couple, and then next book 3 was someone was transgender or gender fluid or non-binary, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
The most important thing is that your blurb is very clear
Yeah.
about what the reader can expect. It's when they're surprised that they get unhappy.
there is a lady on the cover, so if anyone picks that up and is surprised, well, I don't know
It's
how I
kind of
could have
obvious.
made it more obvious.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Marvin here. Since you mentioned newsletters, how often should you send out a newsletter? Weekly, monthly, quarterly, etc.?
I think monthly at the very least, and I kind of think twice a month is ideal if you have something to say, and it doesn't always have to be, I have a new book out or here's a cover.
Yeah.
You part of branding is figuring out what in your newsletter you're going to be saying that isn't just promoting a book, because your brand should be more than just promoting a book.
Yeah, my newsletters are weekly, and it is a lot to keep up with. It's a lot of content. I have an author interview. I've got the stuff now from Story Origin that I'm putting in there. I've got usually I do a column myself. I've got something special about one of my books. Um, I think the most important thing I was told when I first started out this was be consistent. So if you're
Yeah.
going to put it out weekly, do it weekly. If you're going to be biweekly, do it biweekly. If you're going to be monthly, do it monthly. Don't say I'm going to do it monthly and then do one now and then do one in 6 months and then another a week after that. But just try to find a consistent pattern that you are comfortable with, that you can put together on a regular basis.
And think really hard before you even put out your first newsletter. How realistic is it that I'm going to have enough content to do a weekly newsletter?
Yeah,
And
it's a
what
lot
is
of work.
that content going to look like? Is it going to be, am I going to share recipes and anecdotes about my life and funny stories and promote other authors and talk about TV shows and movies? That's a constant stream of content that you can always pull from. But if it's going to be just very book centric and just about your book, then you're probably not going to have enough content to do a weekly newsletter. Scott's newsletters are great because they're broad and they're full of interesting content. But he's got a lot to draw from based on what he writes and his business. So you just need to really think about it. It's easy to get ambitious in the beginning and then
And then
3
drop off.
weeks in go, oh, what am I going to talk about this week?
But there's all kinds of possibilities. Like I did an entire newsletter point of view column on different types of Oreos. So I went out and researched and found all the kinds of Oreos there were and did this whole thing about them. So, I mean, it doesn't, like Nazari was saying, it doesn't have to be about writing all the time, although a lot of mine is. You can find other things. Do you like gardening? What's in your garden this week? What did you have an interaction with a fan that really struck you this week? Is there something on TV that gave you this idea for this new thing you want to try out? So there's all different kinds of ways you can go with content to kind of let those readers into your world a little bit and feel like they get to know you as a person and not just the guy that writes the science fiction books.
And also, I guess, special free content to get them to sign up to the newsletter in the first place. I know for authors, this is usually like a short story or a novella or something they'll give away free to newsletter subscribers. As an artist, I don't have that exactly, but I've been looking at doing things like cover giveaways or maybe making some free PNGs and like stock images that my subscribers could use for their own marketing material, that kind of thing.
Nice.
That sounds really fun. And that's actually prompted me to ask. We've got about 5 minutes left. So this would be a really good time for people who want to hear more from you and follow you to learn your social media contacts. So Laurie, let's start with you. If people want to keep up with Indigo and hear what you're doing, how do they find you?
I'm on Facebook. Indigo Marketing and Design can be found on Facebook by just searching my name. I honestly don't do a lot of self-promotion on Facebook. So if you follow me on Facebook, what you're mostly going to see is me marketing other people, or looking for people to sign up for events that I'm doing, that type of thing. If they're interested in me personally, I'm Lori Bell Blanton on Facebook. That's my personal Facebook. You'll see all about my camping adventures and the food that I'm eating and my dog, and so you're welcome to follow me there too.
Laurie's camping adventures are amazing. I think it's worth following her just for those. So Scott, how do we find you?
I was going to say, can we pay you extra, Lori, to like hold up a book while you're camping?
I should do that. I will. I'll start posing in front of the cute vintage campers with a book.
I actually kid you not, I don't know if you guys know Brandon Witt, and I did not ask him to do this, but he once posed naked in a bathtub with studs. You couldn't actually see, anything else, holding my new book as a new release. So if you can get that kind of publicity, awesome. So for me, I have my own website, jscottcoatsworth.com, just like the name. I'm on BookBub, Prolific Works. My main presence is on Facebook, and I am on there an ungodly amount of time. So if you ever want to reach me, Facebook message me is probably the easiest, quickest way to get me. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, which, like I said, I'm not doing a lot with, but I will be going back to it a little bit more now that I'm just about past my 2-week period and can actually start going out and doing things again.
Oh, how exciting.
One more quick thing. I did this. This is the Sacramento Suburban Writers Club had me do a thing about being an independent author and self-pub called Being Your Own Writing Boss. So if you email me at scott@jscottcoatsworth.com, I will send you a copy of this. It's just a PDF. It has a lot of tips for just kind of how you do your cover, how you get your book out there, things I've learned about social media accounts, etc. So yeah, email me and I'll send you a copy of that.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And Sarah, how do people keep up with you?
I'm on, let's see. Well, there's my website, theillustratedpage.net/design. There's my Facebook is mostly through a Facebook group is where I do my design things, and you can search the Illustrated Page book design again for that. Instagram, I am working on Instagram still. I do not like Instagram, but I am. It seems like it'd be a good match for art, so I'm trying it. That's at Illustrated Page Design, and then on Twitter, I have my. This is only design stuff. Only if you want art is at Waits Design, and then if you want everything from me talking about my dogs to books I'm reading to also design stuff, then it's Cool Curry Books.
Awesome. Thank you.
Now, does any of us actually like social media? I mean,
No.
Sort of.
I mean, we live on it, but it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Nusodia, how do we keep up with you?
You can find me personally talking about my dogs and my kids and whatever I'm watching on TV at the moment at Nasadia Andrews on literally any social media platform. I think I'm the only one. And if you want to follow marketing, inkslingerpr.com or inkslingerpr on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram.
So I've recently started following Nusodia on Facebook, and she's already made me laugh twice with what she shares. She has quality memes, I'll just say.
Yay.
So we've got a message from Marvin here saying, thank you all, you are great. This is wonderful info, and I have to agree. This has been a fantastic discussion. I don't want to wrap this up, but we do
Well, one more thing though,
unfortunately
Jillian.
need to. Yes?
Where can we find you on social media?
Yes.
Oh dear. I'm on Facebook as Gillian St. Kevin. I recently started a Facebook group, the St. Kevin Saints. I'm going for like the football team theme. But I have an inactive Twitter, a barely active Instagram. But yeah, you can
Yay.
check me at gillianstkevin.com.
All
So
right.
We need to start a group of inactive Instagrammers.
Yeah, that would be fun. So we have coming up, we have Down the Rabbit Hole, the Researchers Tea Party, and I will be back with editing from an editor. So we've got lots to look forward to. And yeah, thanks again to our guests. If you want to keep the conversation going, we have a Discord channel, Outside the Box Social Media, where you can continue to ask questions and pick the brains of our wonderful panelists. So thanks again for joining us. See you all later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great chat.
Bye. Okay, now I have to figure out how to end the stream. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.